What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Top 10 Tuesdays. This week's episode, we're taking a look at my top 10 favorite Twilight Zone episodes. The Twilight Zone has always been one of my favorite shows. I absolutely love it, and I've been watching it a lot on Netflix. And I figured since October, is the month of horror, and I'm going to be doing every Top 10 Tuesdays episode on, something pertaining to horror. I figured I'd start with the Twilight Zone. So before we start, I just want to say these are just my top 10. They're not really in any order because I love all these episodes equally. I do have some honorable mentions that I'll mention before we get to my number one, but these aren't really in any particular order. Also, I haven't seen every single episode of The Twilight Zone, so if I'm missing an episode out that you like or you're wondering why it's not on my list, it's probably because I haven't seen it. So, without further ado, let's get started with number 10. Coming in at number 10, we have The Invaders. This episode's really unique because there's barely any dialogue. The only dialogue is maybe like the last scene. I think only like 2 or 3 sentences are spoken throughout the whole episode. Basically, you have this woman. She lives out on this farm, and she's cooking dinner she lives by herself. All of a sudden, she hears a noise, and she goes up onto the roof, and she sees this little spaceship with all these little alien creatures. And she thinks they're aliens, and of course this freaks her out, and she's being attacked, and basically the whole episode is her trying to fend off these little tiny men. They're like that big, and they say she's a giant, but meanwhile she's in proportion to like how we are. But the aliens or whatever they are, they're like that big. She's fighting them off. They're in these like little spaceship things, and basically the whole episode is just a build up to the ending. It has a very great twist ending, and it's a very unique episode. So that's number 10. Coming in at number 9, we have The Midnight Sun. Now this episode's very psychological in a sense. Basically, you have this young girl, I think her name's Norma? Yeah, I think that's her name. And Mrs. Bronson is her landlady. Norma's a very young woman, and Mrs. Bronson's an older woman. Basically, they're in New York City, and you find out that the sun moved out of orbit the Earth has moved out of orbit, and it's now moving closer and closer towards the sun every single day. So basically, everyone in the city has either moved north to get away from the heat or have just died. Basically, it becomes so hot that things are melting, and people are dying. It becomes over 120 degrees. But Norma refuses to leave, and so does Mrs. Bronson. So they kind of live together in this apartment complex. The water only lasts for an hour. That gets turned on during the day. Eventually, the water runs low and the food runs low. And Mrs. Bronson, since she's elderly, she starts succumbing to the psychological effects of this heat and keeps imagining things. And Norma is trying to, keep herself sane while keeping Mrs. Bronson under control. And then you find out on the radio that there's these looters running around the city, and one of them comes in and threatens Norma and Mrs. Bronson, and that escalates into a whole thing. And then basically, like all these Twilight Zone episodes, it has an amazing twist ending, which I didn't see coming. It's a very great episode, very psychological, so that's number 9. Coming in at number 8, we have one of the all-time classic episodes, The Hitchhiker. Basically, you have this woman moving across country, and everywhere she goes, she keeps seeing this hitchhiker in this coat and hat, and he keeps going like that. And at first she's like, okay, she doesn't think much of it, but as she's going from city to city and town to town, he's there ahead of her, which, is she keeps wondering, she's on the turnpike, and yet he still manages to reappear in a city ahead of her. So she's like, okay, this is weird. So eventually she finds out she's being stalked by this hitchhiker, and she comes close when she breaks down on the train tracks. And again, the ending, it's a very good twist ending. It's very creepy, and if you put yourself in that position, it would be extremely creepy. So that's number 8, The Hitchhiker. Coming in at number 7, I think it was the first Twilight Zone episode I ever saw, and that's Time Enough at Last. You have this man, Henry Bemis, played by Burgess Meredith. All he wants to do is have some alone time and read his books. He loves reading, but his wife rips up his books. She hates the idea that she's reading. She's a real bitch, by the way. And his boss gets mad at him for reading. So basically, one day, Henry, he works at a bank. He walks down to the vault, locks himself in there. There's this big explosion, and when he comes out, there's nothing. The whole Earth is completely wiped out. It's just post-apocalyptic mayhem, and he's the only one left alive. So at first he's kind of worried, he's walking around, but then he stumbles upon the library and figures, okay, there's all these books, and there's no one here to finally bother me. I finally got my wish. But in the Twilight Zone fashion, it doesn't quite work out that way. And it's a very great ending. Another one that would really suck if you were in his position. Yeah, but very great twist ending. Just a very great episode in general. So that's number 7. Coming in at number 6, we have 5 characters in search of an exit. You have this army general, or major. He wakes up. He has no knowledge of who he is or how he got in this room. He's in this room. It's like a cylinder shaped. And he's there with 4 other people. There's the army major. There's a ballerina. There's a bagpiper, a hobo, and a clown. And of course, none of the other 4 know who they are or how they got there. And each of them have their own idea of how they got there. The army major thinks they're in hell. The ballerina thinks they're either in a spaceship or, they've gone insane and they're imagining things. The bagpiper thinks they're in limbo. The clown thinks they're something else, or they each think of different reasons why they're there. And again, a very great twist ending that I didn't see. Very great. They try to escape, and they try different methods, and the ending is just like a very unique ending. So that's number 6. Coming in at number 5, we have Nightmare at 20,000 Feet. This is William Shatner. He's the main character in this movie. He just got released from an insane asylum. He's on a plane with his wife going back home. He keeps looking out the window, and on the plane, or on the wing of the plane, he keeps seeing this monster, and he keeps telling everyone, there's a monster out there. But of course, knowing his previous psychotic break, they think it's a joke. But eventually, it escalates into this whole thing, and he ends up stealing a gun from a police officer and scaring the shit out of all the passengers on the plane. And of course, everyone thinks he's insane. But again, a very great twist ending. You're not really sure if he was insane or was he really telling the truth. So that's number 5. Coming in at number 4, we have The Living Doll. This is kind of like the original Chucky. This girl gets this doll called Talkie Tina, and she's, very nice and everything, and the stepfather comes home, and he's like, why did you buy this toy or whatever? And Talkie Tina says, my name's Talkie Tina, and I don't like you very much. And the guy's like, oh, okay, whatever. And then it eventually says, my name's Talkie Tina, and I'm going to kill you. And of course, he's like, oh, okay, whatever, but that doll is so freaking creepy. If you've seen the episode, you know what I mean. It's probably just as equally as scary as Chucky. Maybe it's probably more scary because it doesn't have it move its mouth or anything. It's just a doll that talks. It's very creepy. Again, a very great ending, and it just proves that you should show a little respect to a doll when it threatens to kill you. So that's number 4. Coming in at number 3, we have The Masks. You have this old man. He's dying. It's down in Louisiana, in New Orleans. And all his family are just waiting for him to die so they can take his money because he's rich. And he says, okay, I'll give you all my money if you wear these masks I made you. But you have to wear them until midnight. You can't take them off. And I'll wear my own mask. And they're like, okay. So they all put on the mask because they're greedy bastards. It's his son, his wife, and his son and daughter. So this whole family, they'll do anything for money. So they put on the masks, and the clock strikes midnight, and then it has a very great twist ending. And it just shows it's kind of a lesson on not being greedy and not wishing someone, especially in your family, would be dead. It's just a very great lesson, and he gets back at them in a very satisfying way. So that's number 3. Coming in at number 2, we have To Serve Man. This episode, you have the spaceship crash in Washington, D.C., and it's full of these aliens. And, of course, everyone's scared to death. But, of course, the aliens say, okay, we're peaceful. We're going to teach you how to use our technology. We're going to teach you how to grow crops and everything, so the world will never grow hungry or thirsty or anything. And, of course, all the public is like, yeah, this is a good thing. But they have this language, and all these linguists are trying to translate it. And when they translate it, they find out the horrifying truth of why the aliens are really there on Earth in the first place. So that's number 2. Before we get to number 1, here are some of my honorable mentions. Coming in at number 1, my favorite Twilight Zone episode. It always has been. It's amazing in every sense of the word. And I think I've seen this episode the most out of all of them. So that's my number 1 is, Will the Real Martian Please Stand Up? In this episode, you have a spaceship crash out in the middle of the woods. A woman calls and reports it. You have these 2 state troopers come out to the woods to investigate it. And they see that something did land there. There's an imprint on the ground of something that landed there. And then they see these footprints leading from where that crashed through the woods. So they're like, okay, let's decide, we'll just follow the footprints. They follow the footprints through the woods, across the highway, into this roadside diner. They go into the diner and they find this bus full of passengers that's on their way from somewhere to Boston. And you have like a married couple, you have a single woman, and you have another older married couple, and you have this hobo weird dude, and you have this businessman, and then the guy that works behind the counter. So the cops come in there and they're like, did you see anyone come in here? And the owner says, no, it's just been us. The bus driver's there too. The bus driver says, no, we've been here. We've been the only ones in here. And the cops are like, well, there's footprints leading in here from the woods. There was an incident in the woods. And the bus driver's still like, no one came in. And then they eventually find out, try to figure out, okay, someone must have snuck in there when they were all getting off the bus. And it eventually turns into mass hysteria. Everyone in this diner is getting freaked out that there's someone that's not who they appear to be. The jukebox starts playing by itself. The lights start dimming by itself. The phone starts ringing. And it's great. What really makes this episode is, of course, it has a twist ending. And when it happens, you're like, wow, I didn't see that coming. But then directly afterwards is another twist ending. So, I mean, it's very rare to pull off a twist ending, let alone a double twist ending. And it's just amazing. Every time I watch it, it's just great. It's like every time I watch it, it's like I'm watching it for the first time. If you haven't seen Will the Real Martian Please Stand Up, definitely check that one out. It's a standout of the series. Definitely check out all these episodes. They're absolutely amazing, especially if you're a big Twilight Zone fan. So that's it, everybody. That's it for my Top 10 Tuesdays, my Top 10 favorite Twilight Zone episodes. I really hope you enjoyed. Please let me know if you've watched The Twilight Zone, and I would love to know some of your favorite episodes. Like I said, I haven't seen all of them, so if you recommend some that I haven't seen, I would definitely like to hear which ones you would recommend. So anyway, that's it for today, guys. Thanks for watching. Please like, comment, subscribe, do all of that. But anyway, that's it for right now, guys. Talk to you tomorrow. Thanks for watching. See ya.